Now this is 25 minutes long, but I'm hoping it will make clear all the details that you need to know. G'day, and welcome to part 2 of making a Verge hairspring from scratch. In part 1, while I was talking about reducing the wire to a square, what I neglected to say was, of course, if your hairspring is close to the actual dimensions of your wire, then you only need to reduce it by as much as is required. Now, being very, very small flats, if you're only doing a small amount, you will have to be careful with your micrometer to make sure that you are actually measuring the new dimensions of your wire and not coming across the corners like this, if these are corners, which they're not, but you know what I mean. But once you do have the required width here, then yes, you just stop, polish those two sides, and then continue to reduce down the two sides here. So you can have your hairspring reaching pretty much all the way across your wire if that is the matching dimensions that you end up with. Another thing I realized after doing the last video was that if you don't have diamond frosted needle files, just the carborundum paper wrapped around paddle pop sticks will do the job. It'll take a bit longer, and you'll have to refresh the paper quite regularly, but it can be done. It's very cheap, and you can head on to it straight away. So Mr. Blakey's book, that I've been working from, he describes the art of coiling up your hairspring in this manner. Basically, you hold one end with a pair of what he calls loop pincers, basically a clamping pincer, and then you use a very small pair of smooth-jawed pliers to do the curling with. And you progress thus. First you put a kink in the end, which is what's going to go into the collet at the balance wheel, and then coming back about an inch up your hairspring, you twist the pliers about 45 degrees and then move forwards, causing it to curl. Then you go back another inch, give another twist, and curl, and so on, and working your way backwards up your hairspring until the whole lot is curled. This bears a lot of similarity to paper quilling, and as I don't have a pair of very small smooth-jawed pliers, paper quilling is the direction I'm going to go in. Now, having done all that work, turning the wire into our blank for the hairspring, it would probably be best if we didn't wreck it first go. And I've found a good practice substitute is thin strips of paper. This will enable you to practice the various techniques required without causing any lasting harm, and it will also help develop a light touch with what you're doing, because this being paper, picks up all of the little discrepancies that you make. Now for the curling, you can use any sort of wire. You could use a fine needle stuck in a wooden handle, like this. The handle doesn't have to be round. It can be like this one. It's just a triangular bit of beading with a hole drilled in one end and a needle sunk in it. It actually affords quite good hold. But I'll be using this little watchmaker's screwdriver. Interestingly, the blade in this is made with the next size up wire from the one that we used to make the hairspring. When doing the curling, don't press full pressure at the beginning of your curl, otherwise you'll put a kink in it like that. Likewise, when you finish, don't stop and then suddenly release, otherwise you have a kink in the other end as well. What you need to do is come in with a gentle addition of pressure, so going along and then building up pressure and pulling it round the wire, and then easing off as you get to the end of your curl, like so. And that gives you a much more even curl like that. Also, if you have your curler at an angle to the work, then you will get a conical spiral. It needs to be at right angles to the work at all times. If you end up with a conical spiral, don't stress over it. I'll most likely get it here as well. I'll be showing you how we correct that as we go along. So we begin by putting the hook on the end that will go into the collet on the balance staff. And now going back a couple of centimeters or so and using the fading in and out of pressure that I was talking about, we do our first part of the curve. Any part of the work can be gone over a number of times in order to build up the type of curve that you're wanting. Now going back a little bit further to do the next part. Okay, I've sped this up now so it doesn't get too boring. I'm guessing you could do this curling in very short increments if you wanted to, being careful of course with your feed in and feed out of pressure. Now here I'm actually improving a tighter bend by rolling the tool back the other way, thereby opening the curve. And again. As you can see, things are not going entirely to plan. Oh well. Okay, so we now have a fairly wonky looking tangle of paper there, but this will give good opportunity to show how to remedy the problems. So here we go. You need a pair of tweezers. An elbow pair is nice because that means you can get right on top, straight up and down without getting your hand in the way. And then a very fine but stiff bit of wire for stroking around the curves to either increase or decrease them. Please forgive my slight overexposure for the next little bit. So first we start by studying what we have, and we're looking for atypical curving. So either something that's too tight a curve or something that's too shallow a curve, and it's by manipulating those that we can move the coils all over the place and get them in the positions where we want them. First of all, we really sort of want to stop having coils on top of each other so we can see things properly. And we have, let's see, so this is a slightly tight curve around here and then a much tighter curve there. So I'll start by loosening this curve a little bit. Now, what happens is where you're working in manipulating curves has an effect sort of about 120 degrees away from where you're working. So if I grab here and with this screwdriver go inside the curve and just stroke outwards a little bit and then move along and do on the next bit and along on the next bit. Don't want to do all your work in one spot, otherwise you'll end up with a kink in your hairspring. Okay, now this one here is a bit of a tight curve as well. So work on that. You can see that's moved. See, I was working here, but the whole coil's shot over this way. Now, we need to work out what's causing that and how to move it back into this large empty space we've got, because it's all way too tight over here. And here's our problem, I think. So if I grip at the beginning of this tight curve, do a slight manipulation, go around a little bit further, a little bit more of a manipulation, and just a touch more there. Okay. Now, in looking at this, I'm also noticing that this curve here is a bit on the tight side. It shallows right out around here, but here it's a bit tight, and so it doesn't give us as much wiggle room as we need. So I will open that out a little bit. So we now have a lot of space here, and we can move these coils over and give ourselves more space on this side. Again, looking at where you want to go, and which is this way, and going back about 90 to 120 degrees from that. And a little bit further. Okay, that's an improvement. We still have coils sitting on top of each other here, so we still need to faddle about with that. Okay, we need to move the coil that way. Now we've got quite a bit of space here, very little space there, so this one sitting underneath can be extended out. Okay, zoomed in a little bit here. So we still have a coil sitting up on top of this one here, and I've made a bit more space around here, so we're still basically tinkering away, working out where things are too close and where things are too far apart. Just little bit by little bit. As I think I've said before, the initial part only took me an hour or so, but it was a couple of days of tinkering to get all these curls sitting the way I wanted them to. Moving it in. Okay. Now, that's slightly tight there. What will also happen, especially in the early days of doing this sort of thing, is that just coming back the next day, you'll quite possibly start seeing answers for little twist problems that you couldn't work out. Or you might think everything looks absolutely schmick one day, and the next day when you go and have a look at it, you realise, no, it doesn't. Alright, I need to get this over here. Turning around into different locations, it's always good to give yourself a slightly different eye into what you're looking at. Okay, so thankfully our curve that is sitting under this one is a little on the sharp side. So by doing that thing of coming back about 90 to 120 degrees or so from where we want this to go, hopefully, let go. Okay, so we've now separated all the coils. I'm going to bring this in a little bit because it's still very close to here. A bit of a nudge. And that's just getting rid of some of the kinks I'm looking at. Slight kink here, sort of tighter bends. You can see there's a bit of a flat bit there from where I did some before and was a little too firm. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. That's relatively equal across. Certainly good enough for what we're doing now. But what we do have is a lot of conical twist in different planes. And so our next task is to flatten those coils down, get them all in the same plane as each other, and then we can continue organizing the coils until the spiral is the way we want it to be. Okay, so for this part of the process we need 2 pairs of tweezers. Again, the elbowed ones are quite handy. And we have to study our coil to find out what parts are sitting on the ground and what parts are lifted up. And from this angle you can see there's a lot of space. In fact, I can get my tweezers all the way under to the middle coil in that area without bumping into it. Yeah, that's flatter. Alright, so from this angle, so we've got this one is way up in the air. So we need to go back to where the coil is last sitting on the ground, and with our two tweezers, basically take the spring and give a twist, a sideways twist like that, and that will change the angle of the remaining part of the spring, and thereby sort of basically move things down into where we need them to be. You don't, though, want to have your tweezers too close to each other. Otherwise you'll end up with a sharp kink in it. Or, just put it another way, if you do have your tweezers close together, which you may need to, just do a very small one and then keep working away. A bit like as we were adjusting the curves themselves. You just do small amounts and then work your way along and excuse me, and build up your results. So we've got the coil is sitting neatly on the ground here. It's way up in the air over here. So I will endeavour to put a little bit there. Again, the paper is a little less forgiving, which is a good thing. Okay, that's helped. Trottle around and find our next one. Okay, this is neatly on the ground here, but that side, as you can see, is way up in the air. So, and I can see actually that, hang on, let's see if we can get this around. Even though this part is on the ground, it is tilted at a very steep angle, in which case that's not really our problem. Our problem is back another coil to this one here. See, if I flattened this one out by twisting there and got this down, I would be putting quite a change in its angle here, which is, at the moment, that angle is planar to the rest of that coil, so that is all pretty much correct to there. So yeah, our fault actually comes all the way back to this one here. So I think, yep, alright, so carefully, again, we'll just do a little bit at a time. Go around another one. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't all work first time around. Go back and gently do a bit more. But that has given us some pretty good results. It's now bumping into the side there though, so use what we learned earlier. There's our big gap here. And just ease that back in. Alright, so that's already looking a lot better than it was. It appears to be a fairly general spiral now going out this way, so we'll flip it up. Alright. Again, trying to work out where the first part of the problem starts. So this outer ring, the outer coil is quite fine, as in it's okay. And then as we reach here, it starts angling upwards. So we're going to have to start working back here. Now I'm going to move the elbowed tweezers. Oops. Okay, that's better. But again, it's shuffled over. All right. With the actual steel spring, I'd probably wouldn't try doing the coil centering manipulation with both sets of tweezers. I'd probably switch to using the little screwdriver. So lots of staring, lots of wondering. And trying not to do too much at any one time. Oh, that's getting a lot closer now. There's a little bit poking out through the middle there. All right, so flip it over. So now, as far as I can tell, this coil here is now fairly flat, but the center launches up, and here the wall of the curl is leaning inwards, and so this is where our problem is. Here is where the wall is straight up and down, and then it starts to angle, and that's what's causing this to flip up. So we will have to start here. It was a bit too severe. Alright, this one is also looking a bit wonky. Okay, looks like I've pushed things a little bit too far the other way. It's important that if you realise you're getting a bit bug-eyed looking at this and repeating mistakes and going backwards and forwards and not getting anywhere, to take a break and come back later in the day or even tomorrow. Because this can be fairly fatiguing when you're learning in your early days, which I still am. I've made about, let's see, I made 3 or 4 test hairsprings, I suppose you could say, trying out the idea. The first one that came in with decent dimensions, I stuck in the watch, the late 1700s pocket watch, and yeah, it runs and can keep within a minute or 2 a day, which is very, very nice. But yes, I'm by no means an old hand at this. This is all still very new for me as well, but quite exciting. Okay, so that is quite suddenly, that's mostly flat. You can see there's still a little bit sticking out there and whatnot, but that has suddenly become mostly true. And some minor adjustments and things to your curls and stuff, but yeah, that's good. I should probably leave that and come back to it later. Otherwise, I will possibly not be able to see where the very fine adjustments that needs to be done still are. So yeah, that's the way you can practice and build up your skills in knowing what to look for, what actions to do, and get your coil nice and flat and even before you get stuck into that lovely piece of music wire that you've so carefully prepared. So that shall do for part 2, and we'll see you sometime soonish on part 3. But have fun. You can start off already. This gives you all the information I think you need to know to have a shot at it. The last one will be basically me just endeavouring to put these principles into practice and making the finished hairspring. Cheers.